Today's guest is someone who walks the talk, literally, from teaching in classrooms to leading community walk and talks, breathwork sessions, and emotional resilience coaching. Eoghan Roe is on a mission to help people reconnect with their bodies, their emotions, and their truth. At just 28, he's already created his own path, rooted in honesty, purpose, and heart. I'm so excited to welcome Owen to Soul Sessions with Emma today. Welcome, Owen.
Thank you so much. Wow, it's a fantastic introduction.
I hope I did you justice. We will go into your journey today because it definitely has been some journey in such a short amount of time. I saw recently in your social media you've moved to Galway. So you're originally from Claremorris in Mayo, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I moved back to Claremorris in December after spending just over 2 years in Australia. And then in recent weeks have moved to Galway. So moving around quite a bit. I actually had intended to move in January and I came up here for a week, but felt quite isolated and lonely and realized with it being so close to having moved back from Australia that I needed more of a support network around me in that early phase of transitioning home from being abroad, which my family and my friends, my network, I guess, from home gave me at that time. And as I started to come back to myself and find a sense of grounding, I guess, and a sense of community at home again, it made the move easier in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I kind of haven't looked back since.
Right. I saw one of the first things that you did to create a more homely environment was to add a bookshelf to your home. Could you share perhaps a book that you chose for your bookshelf, maybe that you have read or you haven't read and you're excited to read?
Looking at it here beside me at the moment. And the book that I started reading a couple of days ago, it's my second time reading it, is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it's interesting. I've had a couple of conversations about this with people this week. It's the same book, but I'm reading it at a very different time in my life now and pulling different things from that book. The first time I read it was about 6 months after I'd moved to Australia, and I was very much trying to figure out who I was and how I showed up. And it wasn't necessarily travel that brought it out in me, but I just think a change of environment, a change of place shone a light on different parts of myself. And when I think back to that time and reading that book then versus reading it now, it's kind of reminded me how much I have changed in the last couple of years. And I'm not sure if you've read it, but it can be quite an insightful book. Like I guess it's a fictional tale, but there's a lot of deeper meanings that come through from it around like following your path and looking for omens on your path, following your heart, which is something that didn't really make sense to me the first time I read it. But over the past week or so, I've been really tuning into that, and it feels a lot more real for me now, that statement, which is, it's lovely to bring awareness to that and to understand that a little bit deeper.
Paulo Coelho is definitely one of my favorite authors. I think I started to read some of his books when I was in my 20s. The Alchemist, would you believe it, is definitely on my bookshelf. I think a quote I come back to time and time again is when you want something, the universe conspires to give it to you. I'm paraphrasing slightly. I think as you get in tune with yourself, Paulo Coelho definitely connects to the deeper soul element of a person.
Absolutely. And that idea around like maktub, it is written in terms of what you referred to, the universe conspiring to move you in the right direction if you're willing to listen and to figure out what that actually means for you.
When we get in touch with ourselves and we get out of our own way almost and go into our authentic self, I think that's what Paulo Coelho is trying to tell us. If we're on our authentic path, everything actually happens much easier for us. But many of us, we're quite fearful of doing what our heart is actually telling us. I'm sure you've found that. So I was quite fascinated to see that you started off your career as a primary school teacher, then transitioned out of that into coaching. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about that and how that journey unfolded for you?
Yeah, for sure. Both my mother and older sister are primary school teachers, so it felt like a natural progression for me to move into that space. When I was coming out of secondary school, I would have spent a lot of time in and around my mom's school when I was younger. Uh, and then it always felt like the right decision for me to become a primary school teacher. And I taught for 4 years in total after graduating, whilst also working as a personal trainer, both in person and online. When COVID hit, I was looking for something to put my time and energy into, like a lot of other people. And fitness was quite a big theme for me around that time. I started helping some family and friends with their own workouts and nutrition and felt drawn to studying that a little bit more. So qualified as a personal trainer and worked part-time as well as teaching for 3 years. During that time, I moved to Oz. And then in September 2023, I decided to start working for myself full-time in the coaching space, mainly online, but a little bit of in person along the way also, because I wanted to see what life would look like working for myself. That kind of challenge element, I guess, searching for more meaning in my life. I have really enjoyed teaching, and I deeply enjoy the connection element part of teaching and community and working with kids and the staff in schools and feeling connected. It's quite social teaching, but I wanted to try and create a life on my own terms and see what that looked like. Now, there's been a lot of ups and downs with that, and I have actually dropped back into teaching in a substitute capacity over the last 18 months at different times when I felt like I needed that sense of community and connection. Most recently this year, when I moved home from Australia, I worked in my mother's school a day a week, just helping out, and realized I really needed that. It wasn't something that I felt was aligned with me in terms of where I want to go over the coming years. So it has been a big part of my life teaching, but I really enjoy who I am in this space where I can work one-to-one with people around exercise. This is kind of previously exercise, nutrition, habit formation, and then in more recent times, which I'm sure we'll touch on, holding space for people through breathwork.
Brilliant. That must have been a hard call at the time to leave teaching. How did people meet you when you made that decision? Was there acceptance over that career path, or was there some resistance?
I'm quite lucky to have two parents at home that are willing me to follow the things that I'm interested in, which I'm sure has been hard for my mother in particular, being a teacher and them helping put me through college, only for me to go in a different direction. But it has kind of started from them in the sense of them providing the space for me to go and follow the things that I am interested in and that bring me energy. And there has been overwhelming support for the direction that I have taken from all sides, friends, family. Yeah, I'm really lucky in that regard that it was even a possibility for me to step into that. And then since that, people have been so receptive and kind in their words of praise, because that's important along the way. There's been quite a lot of sticky points over the last 15 months working for myself. And it's those little moments with people. It could be something as small as a compliment or an affirmation that you're saying something that resonated with them that actually gives you enough of a lift to keep pushing, to go a little bit deeper and to step further into that space. And so far, on the whole, it's been a very positive experience.
That's definitely something that you are very lucky to have that support, because I could imagine many people want to follow a similar path to you, but through perhaps discouragement from family or society, they decide not to take the plunge into the career that they really want to take. So going back to your time in Australia, I also spent a little bit of time there myself many years ago. I'm wondering, was there a particular moment where you contemplating staying in Australia like many other young Irish people? And what prompted you to come back to Ireland?
Uh, yeah, for sure. There's was a part of me and probably still is a part of me that wonders what life would still be like having stayed in Australia. But I think for me, the idea of wanting to build a business around community and connection and looking at where I would like to have the most impact, Ireland is very much that place for me, as well as being closer to family. And funnily enough, I find that I have gotten closer with my family since I moved away from home because it gave me the space to step into things that were probably more me. And the more me I have felt, the more I felt I can connect with others. So whilst becoming closer with them, being away, I felt this gravitational pull to come back and be closer to them in terms of location also, as well as wanting to take the next steps for my business. Because as amazing as Australia was for me, it can be a little bit distracting at times in terms of the amount of opportunities to travel and social events, which I definitely leaned into. So it just felt like the right time at the end of last year to come home, even though that transition was really difficult. I look back now and feel like I've made the right decision. So who knows what the future will hold? I could find myself back there again at some stage, but it won't ever be forever. I see my
Oh,
future
yeah, it
over
is
this
quite
side of the
far
world. Maybe not
away.
Ireland, but
And yeah, then when you came back to Ireland, it looks like everything happened quite quickly for you. You started a few different events, and one of the major events that brought my attention to you was your walk and talk event. It seemed to have started off in this idea and then created this huge movement in your local community. Would you mind speaking about that and telling us the foundation of where that started and then where you brought it to now?
for sure. It actually originated from a place of loneliness. When you live abroad, without even realizing it, you feel that sense of connection, whether it be from housemates or the gym you train at or the sports team you play on or the nights out that you're all in the same group with or the people you travel with. And in comparison with that, coming home in the middle of winter and feeling a little bit isolated, I was injured at the time, so I wasn't playing sport. I've tended to gravitate away from the late nights a little bit more in the last couple of years. So I was missing that social element also. And I have some good friends who I was able to meet for catch ups and walks, etc. But I just felt that longing for more connection and more group connection. Because I'm a personal trainer, I knew that exercise could be a theme of that to bring people together. And it actually started by just meeting people one on one for a coffee and a chat to offer some value to them. It was an idea that a friend and I came up with to help me get in front of more people. Because when you're working online, you spend most of the day at home working on a screen. And even though you're talking to people, you're not in connection with them really, because connection is mainly around the feeling of being beside someone and the non-verbal as opposed to the verbal. So the first event was a shot in the dark, I guess. I put out a couple of social media posts and some flyers around my local town. I managed to speak on a couple of local radio stations, and thankfully, plenty of people showed up and gave me, again, a little bit of confidence that this could be a thing and people were looking for connection. And a couple of the conversations that you and I had around that time too was that idea was echoed, that we both felt like people are looking for that sense of connection in their lives because life gets so busy and off the back of that, disconnected, that sometimes we don't even know we're out of connection until something like an event like this pops up where we feel that sense of friends and family and people we don't even know coming together and the enjoyment that can come from that. So one event turned into two, which turned into three. We had a sponsor come on board for the third one, a local coffee shop that provided some goodies for everyone on the day. And ran the third one as a charity event also for a friend of mine who passed away last year. So it's been such a positive experience for me and it's given me a lot of energy, which is really carrying me through the business side of things as well, because it's bringing more people into my world. I get to share my message and the things that I'm passionate about with more people, which means a lot to me. And whilst we've taken a break for this month as I finalize my move to Galway, it's definitely something that I'll be leaning into more in the future. Absolutely.
That. And can I ask, just before we move on, did anything unexpected come from that experience by starting off with that walk and talk event?
I think it's transformed my business, not because I've gotten more one-to-one clients out of it. There were kind of, in terms of people who have came in to work with me, I didn't see a crazy difference there, which wasn't why I was organizing it in the first place. And it kind of ties in with how things have changed for me. Things have changed in terms of the connections that I'm now forming with people, the authentic connections that are now forming. For example, people that have came to the Run, Walk and Talk event, I have stayed in contact with them since. They have felt safe opening up about different things that they are struggling with, as well as me being vulnerable with them, which brings people closer together. It's no coincidence that some of the people that came became my case studies for my breathwork facilitator training. And word of mouth is a big thing as well in terms of people coming to the second and third event. A lot of people who came were people who had gotten word from people who were at the first event to come along and see what it was like. So my life has changed in the sense of how connected I now feel to a wider number of people, because when you show up as yourself, you give people permission to show up as themselves too. Their deeper, more authentic selves. And that is a really special thing, because I find that so energizing for me and so nourishing for my body and my mind to speak openly with people and to share that with them.
That's something that stands out about you when it comes to your approach on social media, and also with your coaching program, Grow, which is a great name, by the way. You seem to show up as a very authentic person, which I think is difficult in the world nowadays, especially when it comes to your line of work. You come across as a more real person, and I presume that has helped you as well to reach a wider audience of people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's easier for me to show up in that way now because I know what it's like on both sides of that coin. I know what it has been like to wear the mask and to show up in a certain way for fear of rejection. The term people pleaser gets thrown around a lot, but I definitely would have identified with that in the past, showing up in a certain way based on who I was talking to or what group I found myself in, not really realizing I was doing it, but knowing on a deeper level that I was terrified of rejection. And because I have had those experiences and I can now put words on that and I have something to compare that to, I find it far easier to show up as myself, because if we bring it back to the physical, how I feel in my body is completely different when I show up authentically in comparison with how I used to show up, in the sense of uneasiness in my stomach and tightness in my chest when I felt like I had to perform for people around me, versus how relaxed and energized I feel now, even speaking with you, being able to speak my truth and speak from the heart. It feels like it just flows. And being able to bring that to the online space has been quite refreshing for me, because I have also in the past showed up online in a certain way. I touched on it last week in a post, but when I started coaching online, I thought I had to show up in a certain way or I wouldn't get clients. I wouldn't have people looking at my stuff. And that way would have been very much like a masculine energy, where it's high impact, it's strength, it's very pushy with what I put up in terms of getting people in and showing them what's possible, not really understanding myself or the people I was trying to reach, versus now showing up more as myself than I ever have before, and the right people coming into my world off the back of that. For me, I wouldn't say right and wrong in terms of people, but the right people for me.
Yeah, I think that when you show up a certain way, you attract those who are on the same frequency, I suppose, that look for those qualities. I'm glad that you touched on the idea of masculinity, because just as I was researching a little bit about you, you did mention that when you were younger, in your teenage years, and also partly in some of your adulthood, that you didn't feel quite good enough, and there was times that you struggled a little bit with your own kind of identity and masculinity. I don't know if that's true, but Can you speak to us about how that feels for a young man like yourself? The pressures that we have in society nowadays of how to show up as a man and how that has maybe changed for you over the years.
The concept of masculinity and femininity and how that comes across in our personalities or how we show up is actually quite new to me. And I find it really interesting. I've always known that there are certain stereotypes in terms of how a boy should be or how a girl should be and how we try to fit ourselves in to survive, like to stay in connection. Because I think culturally in Ireland, to survive, and by survive I mean to fit in and to feel in connection, we're drawn to putting ourselves in boxes. And in my context, that would have been showing up as the people pleaser, the funny guy, the person who doesn't really show any emotion, because I felt if I did show emotion, I would have been rejected for that around like friends in sporting context, for example. And I absolutely love sport, but I actually stopped playing for a couple of years because I didn't feel like I fit in with that mold. I actually gained a significant amount of weight around like 11 or 12 years old. And for the next 3 years after that, really struggled with my weight. And I suppose off the back of that, my confidence, my self-worth. And when I was around 16, I grew a lot more and I started to lose the weight again. But I didn't lose that lack of self-worth and confidence. And I think if I felt more comfortable just showing up as myself, and by myself, I mean someone who is a little bit emotional and someone who has so much like love and kindness to give, then I would have liked myself a lot more. But when I think back to my teens in particular, I felt like that wasn't acceptable. It would be seen as very much a feminine trait to show emotion, tears, for example. And I buried that emotion. I would say I spent a lot of those years, teens and in my 20s, with a deep, like walking around with a deep sense of anxiety in my body. Now, I didn't really know what in my body meant at the time because I was quite disconnected from my body. By design, I guess, my thoughts spiraled up here. There was a disconnection from here. And anytime I did come down into here, I could feel that sense of heaviness in my body, which I now know was a lot of anxiety around having to show up in certain ways and not feeling like I could lean into my emotions and lean into that kindness and that sense of love that I wanted to share with the world. So that has been a big learning for me and becoming more in touch with my emotions, particularly this year. You and I, as some of the listeners might know, met on a breathwork facilitator training that we're continuing to move through. And that has had a hugely positive impact on my ability to reconnect with my body, to bring different emotions to the surface and to not to get rid of them, but to make them a part of me, to integrate them as, I guess, a deeper sense of myself and who I am and how I show up. So yeah, I find it all fascinating compared to finding looking inwards being really anxiety inducing for quite a lot of my 20s, which is, it's nice to be able to say that now.
And it's so interesting because the world we live in encourages us to escape from our inner thoughts. As you know, I'm a teacher myself, and teenagers nowadays have so many distractions and they're not encouraged to be bored because, for fear, I suppose, when we are quote unquote bored, we have to look inward. But as you have discovered quite rightly, it's the looking inward that you learn to sort of look at parts of yourselves that need to be shone a light on. I love the quote, hide or heal. And I think definitely healing is the key. So just going back to the breath work, because I'm definitely interested in your take on it, because I think that's had a huge impact on you as a coach and as a young man. For anyone who doesn't know much about breath work, in a quite simple way, how does it help people to bring up parts of themselves that maybe they hadn't faced before?
Yeah, it's an interesting frame to look at breathwork from. I think for me, breathwork actually has a lot of different branches. that feed into different areas of our lives. For example, stress reduction or stillness, or as you've described there, meeting ourselves in deeper ways around our emotions. And for me, a nice frame for breathwork is the mind is the conscious and the body is the subconscious. And there's a Jung quote, Carl Jung, he was a psychiatrist, that I'm trying to recall it now, I'll probably paraphrase here. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate our lives and we'll call it fate. And being able to come into the body as the unconscious and bring whatever the body holds to the surface can be transformative. And for me, that has been very much emotion based. Because I was so stuck in my head, I found that I was trying to think my way out of a feeling problem. And all that led to was more thinking. And off the back of that, an energy drain that I just couldn't seem to escape of. It manifested itself in terms of physical tension in my body as well. So my shoulders and neck and back felt very stiff all the time, and no physiotherapy or massages or saunas would remove that tension. So I started to piece together after years of feeling crap in my body that there was something deeper going on. And Bessel van der Kolk, or Kolk, I think, is an author who has gone deep in this area. And his book is The Body Keeps the Score. And it's very much centered around how the body holds on to stress and tension. And breathwork has been a really helpful tool for me to meet that tension, that emotional tension, I would say, and help to integrate that. And it's no surprise that over the last couple of months, all of that tension in my body has just eased away. I feel so free physically. I'm back playing sport now after being away from hurling for 2.5 years. I just feel great. It's so exciting for me to be able to share that gift with other people because it's not very well known. I think the majority of us are stuck in our heads. Personally, I didn't really know what it meant to come into my body about 7 months ago. Lots has changed since.
And do you find, Owen, that there's lads, let's say, on your Gaelic team or so on, would they be open to exploring breathwork, or do you get met with sort of skepticism from many people your age?
It's funny, I'm yet to meet one person who has had anything negative to say about breathwork or about how I speak about it. Now, maybe they don't say it to me, but they might think it outside of that. I'm not sure. But the way I approach breathwork with different people in my life is to try and meet them at where they're at with it, as opposed to forcing information or a narrative on them. For example, with men my own age who wouldn't typically be very in touch with healing or emotional regulation, I tend to frame breathwork as a way to reduce stress because that's what it is. And for some people, that can be very impactful. For other people who are more in this space already and have been to therapy, talk therapy, and enjoy yoga and Pilates, and maybe have gone to things like Reiki before, the conversations tend to be a little bit different. And we speak a little bit more about emotional regulation and the shadow and how the masks we wear in our lives, the effect that that can have on our bodies, and how breathwork can be a tool to help show up as our authentic selves. And then for people who have zero awareness about anything to do with breathwork, I think a good entry point is around sleep, and to show them how beneficial it can be for sleeping well, because sleep is a foundational principle of health. Typically, when we start to sleep better, if we come back to the phrase, our story follows our state. If our nervous system is in a more regulated state off the back of good quality sleep, the stories that we tell ourselves about how our days are, how our lives are, will change positively off the back of that. So those are my different entry points, I think, for it.
Me sold already. So I wanted to also comment on the fact, it's something I have said to you before. I said your voice is just such an amazing voice, and I think it's been used quite nicely recently. Have you just started as a radio host, or did I see something recently with Midwest Radio?
I recorded an 8-week block of short snippets for Friday mornings based around a concept called the emotional cycle of change. And it refers to how we make changes in our lives that are informed by our emotions as opposed to working against them. Because I think in a world that's becoming busier and busier and more based around hustling and grinding and pushing, the less attention we pay to our emotions, the more likely it is that we're going to spiral and keep finding ourselves stuck in the same position. So I wanted to put something together that reached more people, and Midwest were kind enough to give me the opportunity to do that off the back of me advertising Run, Walk and Talk, the events that I was running. So I've been quite lucky in that regard, and it's something I enjoy, funnily enough. Something I struggled with a lot over the last couple of years working online was feeling like I was speaking to no one, and not having my voice heard, because I care about people. I care about the people I work with. I care about the people who I put out information to, and I want them to feel like they're listening to someone who cares and puts them first, as opposed to putting money first or their own agenda. So it's has been quite validating for me to be able to find these spaces now where more people can listen in and hear what I have to say, because I feel like as the more I get to know myself and come into my truth, that the more helpful that can be for other people also. Kind of, there's a quote that a mentor of mine uses, that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And if you're showing up as your best self, you allow other people to come with you on that, and they can stand on your shoulders and see themselves in that light also.
I mean, one thing for sure, you're an extremely ambitious young man, and it seems like you have a lot of plans for the future. Do you have a greater sort of 5-year plan that you're hoping to achieve now with the business and with maybe a bit of radio work? What's in the pipeline for Owen?
It's a good question. Actually started over the last couple of weeks working on my next steps. I mentioned earlier in the call that the last 6 months have brought about a lot of change for me, and I feel like I've changed more in the last 6 months than I had in 27 years before that. And what the next steps look like for me are stepping more into community. What that is exactly, I'm not 100% sure yet, but I have some plans to bring together more people in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are struggling to find that sense of connection and show up as themselves in a space that provides for that. I love working with people one-to-one also, and that will always be a part of what I do. But I feel like having now found breathwork, it is such a powerful tool for people to meet themselves in deeper ways, but also to bring community together, because the types of people who are drawn to breathwork and bring that kind of curiosity to themselves, they want to get to know themselves on a deeper level. I tend to gravitate towards those people anyways, because I feel like I can show up more as myself with someone who accepts me for how I show up or what I say. So in terms of my next steps, I want to lean into community more, as well as putting together a one-to-one offering that changes the way that people show up for themselves. Because I'm coming at this from a PT background, and it's always been about the exercise and the nutrition and the habit formation and the fat loss. But what I've learned over the last 6 months, and I'm sure you'll agree with me here, you nearly feel like you would want every single person in the world to go through that process, to look inwards, to get a sense of how they show up and how that affects their relationships, how that affects their health, physical health, mental health, emotional health. And I feel it stronger and stronger every day that that's the space that I want to move into more and more. So
I think the fact that you're only in your 20s and you've already found that purpose, I just think it's so inspiring. The way of the future, as they say, we've become very individualistic with, a lot of content online is very much about one person, but you already have that vision that happiness really is in community, and it's bringing us back to, I think, how we were meant to be and how we were from the beginning as human beings. Oh, and it's just been such an absolute pleasure with you showing up today with your honesty, and I really appreciate you sharing your story so openly. I'm sure a lot of people will take inspiration from your journey. If you were to give advice to a young person like yourself who maybe feels trapped and not quite sure where to go with their life and not maybe feeling as brave and confident as you're feeling right now, what step could they take to go in the right direction?
This is an interesting question for me, and it's something I've actually thought about quite a lot over the last couple of years. And I've thought about it in the context of, well, what would have been helpful for me to hear when I was a little bit younger? Because everybody tells us to be ourselves. But what does that even mean? Like, I've heard that so many times over the course of my life, but I've never been able to make any sense of it in my context. But as I step more into the things that make me, me, that's where I feel like the value is. So if I was to tell someone young to be themselves, the way I would describe that to them is to figure out the things that bring you energy, the places, the sport, the instrument, the people that you feel like lift you up, that bring energy into your body, that make your eyes light up when you think about them, and stick with them. Because when I think back to my childhood, I absolutely loved music. I played quite a lot of tennis. I played hurling. And I had all three of those given up by the time I was about 16. And I fell into the trap of just showing up for the people around me. And I suffered because of that, for sure. I can reflect back on that now and think I lost out on so many aspects of my personality because I was showing up as someone else. And thankfully, I've realized that quite young, I would say, and I'm back playing music now. I love all types of sport. I love finding people who I can resonate deeply with. So when I think about being myself, it's about figuring out the things that bring me joy, bring me energy, and leaning into those more and more. I did an exercise last week, which was part of one of our modules in our breathwork training around my perfect day and writing out what that looks like for me and what goes into that and what doesn't go into that. And that for me aligns deeply with being yourself, because who are you? Only the parts of you that you bring to the light, to the world. And for me, that's the people I surround myself with. It's the places I spend my time. It's the hobbies I give my time to. And that would be the advice I would give to someone, is to figure out what that is for you and lean into it. Because it's difficult to do that when we're looking, or we're craving attention, less attention, more connection. I would say we're craving connection because it's hard to forge your own path, but it is so rewarding to be able to do so.
I love that. Less attention, more connection. Brilliant. So, Owen, if people want to maybe find out a little bit more about you or look into your program that you offer, where should they find you?
So Instagram is my main form of communication online. My Instagram handle is Owen, Eoghan, Roe, Roe, coaching, which is a tricky one for people to get right. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for landing me with that one. But I love my name, actually. It's a great Irish name. I'm also on TikTok as Owen Roe Coaching and LinkedIn as well. I absolutely love conversations. I love speaking with people. You and I have spoke plenty over on Instagram over the last couple of months. And like I said, it's something that brings me a lot in terms of energy and that sense of connection. So if anyone is interested in reaching out, nothing really to do with coaching. I just like chatting to people. And then in terms of the service that I provide, I work one-to-one with people around their health. I'm a health and wellness coach. And that includes exercise, nutrition, habit formation, body composition. And in the last couple of months in particular, going a little bit deeper around that in terms of how we show up and why things can feel so heavy when we try to interact with those aspects of our health. So if you are still listening, hopefully, keep an eye out over the next couple of months, because I'm putting together something that will meet that need in a much deeper way, which I'm really excited by.
Wow, I'm really excited to see where this goes. I mean, you've achieved so much already, Owen. The world is your oyster. You know, it's unbelievable. Thank you again for showing up today. Lots of inspirational content. Thank you.